Morning, everyone. Ready to start our March board meeting. Mr. Marino, do you have any announcements? And would you then introduce those who have signed and are ready to speak?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. First, we have a quick safety announcement. Your safety is our first priority. The following are procedures to follow in the event of an emergency. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairway exit A, just across from the main hallway, or stairway E down the hall past the elevator lobby. Notify emergency personnel if you need assistance. Automated external defibrillators for use by trained personnel are located in the main hall just past the elevators. Now we'll begin with the public speakers who have registered to speak this morning, and I'd like to remind everyone each public speaker has 2 minutes to speak. The first speaker is Alan Stevens, who will be followed by Tabitha Decker.
Hello, MTA Board again, and the community that has been attending for over 2 years demanding ADA accessible to the MTA 476 stations. My name is Alan Timothy Lunsford Stevens. Today I'm asking the MTA about the web of deceit. There are 476 stations in 5 boroughs. Only 58 elevators exist and 5% of your borough stations are available if they work. There are 151 New York City subway stations in Manhattan per the official count by you, the MTA. Of these 151 stations, 32 are express local stations. If 18 station complexes are counted at 1 station each, the number of stations is now 121 Manhattan subway stations. Why does the Board of Directors have a deceit about the number of stations in Manhattan? Why the web of deceit, no open books? Why like the other boroughs? Mr. Byford, MTA president, put forth fast forward for 50 new elevators. Remember last month I said it estimates more than $1 million. It was too high for elevator installation. It still is. You, the board, and your planners last month cut President Byford's plan down by cutting 14 stations from his plan without any explanation. Why the web of deceit? The Transit Center, a separate organization, also examined the most traveled 50 community stations examined in each station and came up with 50 most important stations for elevators. Why do you ignore such research project for ideas? Why the web of deceit? Why, if you're broke, do you have to put a surcharge on my cab rides with an additional $3.25 to the MTA to go from my Greenwich Village apartment to Towns to New York Hospital? I'll finish 1 second. I looked at the New York Penn Station now with entrance. I see no changes in the 1, 2, 3 trains after construction finished. Water, urine, chemicals still stand at the turnstiles and at the elevator to the number 1. Why does this extend? I'm asking the MTA why you do not respond to statements from the community.
Mr. Stevens, please sum up.
Directors are cast like a bad Agatha Christie novel.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tabitha Decker, who will be followed by Xian Chi.
Good morning. I'm Tabitha Decker from Transit Center, here as part of the Bus Turnaround Coalition. At Monday's Transit Committee hearing, we heard a lot about fare evasion and relatively little about the progress that New York City Transit is making on improving bus service. We're here today to call on you to sharpen your focus on improving bus service and bringing riders the faster and more reliable service that they deserve. We're also calling on you to expedite the implementation of all-door boarding system-wide, including proof of payment. By doing so, you can improve bus service while lowering fare evasion rates. All-door boarding will speed up the process of getting on the bus, making it less stressful for riders and bus operators alike. It will also make fare payment easier. Right now, if your MetroCard balance is low or if you forgot your MetroCard at home, you'll need to find 11 quarters or locate a vendor or a machine, which is really not easy, especially in the outer boroughs. The new system will create the expectation of random fare checks, a strong incentive for riders to make sure that they've tapped their cards or activated payment on their phones. Why are we so confident that this will work? Well, you currently have all-door boarding and proof of payment on select bus service, and fare evasion rates on that service are very low, 2 to 3% according to your own data. In addition, by transforming bus service with all-door boarding and other elements of your Fast Forward plan, you will attract new riders. Right now, some New Yorkers can outpace our buses on foot. They would pay a bus fare instead of taking a taxi or an Uber if they could count on the bus. Putting police on buses won't solve the fundamental problem of slow and unreliable service. And as the low fare evasion rates on select bus service demonstrate, the use of police for enforcement is not necessary to minimize fare evasion. Given the urgency of turning around performance and the added benefit of lower fare evasion with proof of payment, we urge you to put all-door boarding in place system-wide as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. The next speaker is Xian Chi, who will be followed by Mary Lavelle.
Good morning. My name is Susan Chi. I am an advocate with Centers for Independence of Disabled New York. I have been using e-health service for the past 6 months or so. I love it because I can get from point A to point B in a reasonable time. When I take traditional accessory to get from point A to point B, it will take me hours, depending on where I go. I wasn't informed that the e-health service has become first come, first serve until last week. One day I called Accessorize to book a next day trip with e-health, and I was told that there was no more e-health available for that specific date because Accessorize is giving number of trips with e-health per day. It wasn't the case. It was not the case when I first started using e-health. I feel like first come, first serve for e-health service is not acceptable because I don't know my day schedule is like, what my day schedule is like on bright early morning, and it is stressing me out. E-health is going through a lot of changes right now. That e-health is starting to look like traditional accessory. There shouldn't be a set of numbers trip for e-health per day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mary Lavelle, who will be followed by Joanna Klemenko.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parison Lavelle. I'm the chair of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. I implore the MTA and President Ng to conduct a real and fair competition for the cleanest Tier 4 locomotives. Both the MTA and the governor committed to this in 2016, and in 2018, President Ng promised Queens elected officials the cleanest locomotives. So why has staff failed to conduct a real and fair procurement and competition? Instead, they awarded business to a preferred vendor in the rigged 2013 procurement and have been trying to steer the award for RFP 6263 with favoritism and restrictive specifications. Why are staff defying this board and MTA executives? Then last week we learned that MTA personnel also unfairly disparaged the manufacturer of Waste Management's near zero emissions Tier 4 to the New York State Department of Transportation. During the 6-day period after the Waste Management locomotive arrived in New York City in November 2018, New York and Atlantic Railway did not allow the manufacturer, Knoxville Locomotive Works, to come on to New York and Atlantic's premises to inspect and commission the locomotive or even conduct training. However, MTA saw the new locomotive then and misinformed New York State DOT that the unit had quality problems. The truth is that the locomotive was vandalized. See page 2 to 7 in your handout. Also, untrained New York and Atlantic Railway crews flat-spotted the wheels during this 6-day period by operating the locomotive with the emergency brake on. Why does Cures care about this unfairness? Because our families need an ethical, real, and fair competition for the cleanest locomotives. Long Island Railroad still has the opportunity to professionally and ethically conduct a real and fair competition and avoid investigation. I ask this board and President Eng.
Ms. Lavelle, please summarize your remarks.
I ask this board and President Eng to make this procurement reflect your reforms by rejecting unfairness, waste, abuse, and fraud, and starting this locomotive procurement over. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Johanna Klemenko, who will be followed by Ed Delgado.
Good morning, board members and fellow advocates. I'm here today to speak about the future of the e-hail and on-demand programs, and also about the future of the New York City taxi system, because I think that there's a interrelationship that has to be addressed. As an accessoride advocate, I have not been able to get any clear information about what the future of both the e-hail program and the on-demand program are, in terms of whether the on-demand program will be expanded, whether the e-hail program will be contracted, whether only taxis will be used, whether other car services will be used. I think it behooves the MTA to take a look at the torturous treatment that the taxi industry has gone through, to add congestion pricing to the taxi industry when they're already really struggling to survive. And we're losing taxi drivers very, very rapidly. It's unconscionable. And I really think the program needs to be continued the way that it was initially represented by Steve Lopiano, who was the person who initiated the program, that all of accessoride transportation would eventually be transferred to the taxi system. I think that would be the ideal solution for accessoride passengers who have not been receiving timely, respectful, useful transportation on unconventional accessoride. And it would also be the solution for saving the taxi industry, which is in dire, dire straits. So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ed Delgado, who will be followed by Liam Blank.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Ed Delgado, and I work for HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I did a lot of compliance review around ADA issues. Little did I know that I would become disabled. I'm new to this blind world, and I was very fortunate to get e-hail on demand. It's a real life changer for me. It got me out of the house. It allowed me to get involved in other things, and I won't have to stay home and fight with the wife. However, you know, I'm now going to school to learn how to use computers because it's very different to use a computer when you have vision than when you don't. So I'm learning a whole new thing now, and quite frankly, it's a real learning curve. I have many blind friends now, and unfortunately, they weren't as lucky as I was to get on the e-hail program. And I really will request that this board expand the e-hail program because there are so many people that really depend on it. And the other thing I would like to say is, and I don't know this for a fact, but it would be great if you had some disabled people on the board, because we know what we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Delgado. The next speaker is Liam Blank, who will be followed by Bruce Hain.
Good morning. My name is Liam Blank. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager for Tri-State Transportation Campaign. Tri-State is a nonprofit organization fighting to improve mobility in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Recently, the MTA has been focusing a lot of its attention on cracking down on fare evasion, but missing from this discussion are improvements that can be made to the boarding and fare payment process. It's worth noting that select bus service has very low fare evasion rates compared to standard bus service. SBS routes, which feature proof of payment and all-door boarding, speed up service as much as 30% and have increased ridership. That being said, the MTA should be focusing its energy on expanding SBS features to more priority bus routes throughout the city, as laid out in President Byford's Fast Forward plan. After all, this is a tried and true lesson. When we prioritize better bus service, commuters prioritize the bus. For years, Tri-State has been pushing the state to implement congestion pricing and provide additional revenue to the MTA for system improvements. Now that the legislature is very close to making it happen, it's crucial that the MTA makes significant improvements to bus service so that transit will be an efficient alternative to driving by the time congestion pricing begins. A big part of this includes getting the state to approve a drastic expansion of dedicated bus lanes and automated camera enforcement to keep buses moving without obstruction from automobiles. Targeted interventions like this are crucial to maintaining a seamless commute for transit riders and preventing the worst-case scenario of frustrated commuters clogging roads in private or for-hire vehicles and the significant congestion that would result. We commend the MTA for beginning some of the preliminary work with the bus network redesign process, but millions of New York City bus riders are still waiting to experience tangible benefits to their commutes. What is lacking from all of this is a concrete set of goals and reporting on progress for bus system improvements. Without this kind of transparency, there isn't much accountability, and that's a problem that we encourage the MTA to address immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blank. The next speaker is Bruce Hain, who will be followed by Gene Rushinoff.
Hi. My name's Bruce Hain. I consider myself a rail transportation advocate. And I had prepared a speech, but I see now that you've started something with the L train that could not be reversed without, you'd have to go in reverse, if that makes any sense. So I'm stepping off into the unknown, and as some of you know, I'm not too good at that verbally, but I am the foremost transportation planner of my generation. Let's see. I brought several questions for you because I submitted some, as you know, I've been trying to find out about the tunnel, but to no avail. And I have several questions about it. I submitted March 10 and got no response online. And so I'm wondering, what's the trouble? Well, we know what the trouble with the tunnel is. I mean, you had 5 different proposals for mitigation of closing one tube at a time, which is the way it needs to be done. And they were all wrong. Well, Parsons, Brinkerhoff, whoever they are, they have a reason for that. And it's design of ferry terminals, bus lanes, all kinds of mitigation for complete shutdown, and then some. New buses. Well, you can stage 8 full-length trains between 6th and 8th Avenue. And everyone knew it then. So that would help you to close one tube at a time. Anyway, I hope you'll answer my questions. And here is quite a pile of copies I've made so you can be enabled to do it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hain. The next speaker is Gene Rushinoff, who will be followed by Jackie Cohen.
Good morning. I am Gene Rushinoff with the Strap Hangers campaign. My apologies if my voice is difficult to hear. My voice is the result of Parkinson's disease, and it wasn't easy for me to come here today. I'd like to thank the Accessoride On-Demand program for getting me here. Since 2015, I have used the Accessoride to go to doctor's appointments, visit friends, and see movies. Until recently, all these rides had to be planned 24 hours in advance. Imagine the public outrage if that was a rule for subway and bus riders. But with the on-demand program that has begun to change, the MTA has started to treat its disabled riders like human beings. However, the MTA may turn its back on its disabled riders despite the popularity of the on-demand program. Chairman Farrar, we are counting on you to stand up for MTA's community of disabled riders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rushinoff. It's so good to see you. The next speaker is Jackie Cohen, who will be followed by H.P. Schroyer.
Great. Good morning. My name is Jackie Cohen from the Strap Hangers campaign. I am Gene Rushinoff's anger interpreter. Just kidding. As Gene mentioned in his testimony, I will be repeating his statements for clarity. So as Gene said, I'm sorry if I'm hard to hear. My quiet voice is a result of my Parkinson's disease. It wasn't easy for me to come here today. Normally I use a walker, but can only go very short distances, hence the wheelchair for today. Since the fall of 2015, I have used the MTA's Accessoride paratransit program to go to doctor's appointments, visit friends, and see movies. And imagine my shock to find there was service worse than the city's subways and buses. But that has begun to turn around the last few years. Why? Because the MTA has started to treat its riders with disabilities like thinking and feeling human beings. Until recently, these riders have had to make reservations and know their plans 24 hours in advance. Imagine the public furor that would greet such an onerous policy for subway and bus riders. Now, those of us in the MTA's pilot project can e-hail a cab at any time, day or night, through a convenient app. The program has been wildly successful, but rumors abound that the MTA is considering limitations on on-demand service to discourage riders from using it. Chairman Ferrer, you have the power to keep this on-demand program going. Our groups are counting on you to stand up for the MTA's community of riders with disabilities and expand the Accessoride pilot e-hail program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. The next speaker is H.P. Schroyer, who will be followed by Jason Pinheiro.
During the last 18 months, I've appeared before you requesting a veterans discount and ways for funding. Mr. Chairman, I never got any acknowledgement of the letters and submissions made. That is until 2 weeks ago when Chief Monahan replied to my recommendation for reducing fare evasion. So let me know with a show of hands, how many of you attended meetings where a veterans discount was discussed? How many of you have seen any MTA estimate of cost to provide a veterans discount? I have submitted to you an analysis of cost and funding by dedicating 2 cents from every fare collected. How many of you attended a meeting where this was discussed? How many on this board made any attempt to contact and speak to sponsors of the 2 state bills which provide for a veterans discount? Let me read an excerpt. The MTA shall not have to pay, this is an excerpt from these bills, will not have to pay for the veterans discount from its budget and may only implement it with funds appropriated to it by the state of New York for that purpose. You say you don't have any money, yet you make no attempt to help our efforts to pass the Veterans Discount Bill, which provide funds without you're losing income. We only need 12 more assembly members to pass the bills. This is a nonpartisan issue, so again, I ask this board and governor to explain to the public why a veteran's service
Please summarize your remarks, sir.
sacrifice isn't worth 2 cents. And if you added 3 cents more, you would provide funds for the elevators that are needed by these people. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jason Pinheiro, who will be followed by Joe Rappaport.
Good morning, board members. I'm here to speak regarding a couple of things. One, the presentation that our beloved New York City President Andy Byford did regarding fare evasion. The agency lost $225 million last year, money that we won't recover. Second of all, echoing H.P. Schroeder's comment regarding veterans discount, it is needed that we should have a veterans discount because we are in New York, veterans live here, and they need to move around. But another thing we need to have is elevators. In Monday's presentation on CPOC, they mentioned 6th Avenue on the L, but they excluded the F and M trains. Trains that I usually take when I'm in Manhattan. But also, we need congestion pricing, not only within Manhattan, south of 61st Street. My plan is to expand congestion pricing to cover all 5 boroughs. You heard that right, all 5 boroughs. Every person that enters from Westchester County in the north and Long Island in the east should pay congestion pricing to enter the city, but not in a flat rate. It will be by the flow of traffic. And that way, we will get more revenue and at the same time enforcing the payment of the fare on buses, commuter rails, and on the subway. So that's all I have to say for this month.
Thank you, Mr. Pinheiro. The next speaker is Joe Rappaport, who will be followed by Stephanie Burgos.
Good morning. I'm Joe Rappaport, the Executive Director of the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. Earlier this month, a federal judge ruled that the MTA violated the Americans with Disabilities Act by not making the Middletown Road station in the Bronx accessible when it renovated there, when you renovated there. There are scores of other stations that should be accessible, and now it appears, there are scores of other stations you have renovated or will renovate that should be accessible, and now it appears that a major funding stream, congestion pricing, is likely. So there's no more flimsy excuse to prevent you from making a binding legal agreement in our lawsuit calling for a fully accessible system. There's never been an excuse, flimsy or not, for the lack of a settlement in our elevator maintenance case. AM New York Online has a story today showing why better maintenance is essential. It describes my colleague Valerie Joseph's experience being carried up the stairs of the J Street Metrotech station by New York City firefighters, along with her power wheelchair. That took 4 firefighters just for the chair because of a broken elevator. The article is actually about something else, Valerie's use of on-demand Access-a-Ride. She describes the tremendous freedom, and you've heard it from other people today, that it gives her. The same kind of freedom that other transit riders can take for granted. That on-demand program should continue as is, and it should be expanded. Finally, President Byford apologized on Monday for the lack of communication about the transition to the so-called enhanced broker service for advanced e-hail service. But that was only part of the MTA's failure. There was absolutely no consultation with Access-a-Ride riders and advocates before the transition. You can and must do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rappaport. The next speaker is Stephanie Burgos, who will be followed by Lisa Daglian.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Burgos Veras, and I'm a senior organizer with the Riders Alliance and also part of the Bus Turnaround campaign coalition. And so this week it's been a busy week for transit. We have news that congestion pricing might become a reality, that we're using now more bus-mounted cameras along new routes, and also news about increasing NYPD presence on buses to stop fare evasion. And while some of these are worth applauding, not everyone that I've mentioned is. And I know whether you take the bus or not here on this board, I'm not sure. The one thing that we can agree is that buses are not working, that they're failing riders, that they're unreliable, and that bus service has been neglected for years. And through the advocacy of bus riders who have worked extremely hard, we finally got a commitment from President Andy Byford to improve buses. And then earlier this year, we got the mayor on board to give buses priority on our streets. And this is huge, okay? We're improving bus service for millions of riders, and there are 2 million of them. And when you look at who these 2 million people are, they're people who are low income, they're people of color, they look like me, they have places to go, they want to pick up their kids from school, they want to go grocery shopping. But these errands become difficult when they have to wait 40 minutes outside for a bus, and they don't have another option to get around. So on Monday, when the conversation was about fare evasion, the conversation should not be about that. It's about how we can improve a bus service for these 2 million New Yorkers who are outside in the cold. We should be talking about making our bus plan a reality. Let's talk about how the redesign in the Bronx is going. Let's talk about putting those 15 miles of bus lanes on our streets. Let's talk about giving all the digital screens on our buses. Let's talk about expanding all-door boarding citywide. We see the success that we've seen on SBS routes with proof of payment. Let's talk about bringing that to all of our buses. And let's also talk about making sure that the city is able to implement fair fares fully so 800,000 New Yorkers can have access to a lower fare. So let's invest our energy wisely. Let's talk about let's focus on improving the lives of our bus riders.
Ms. Burgos, please summarize your remarks.
Criminalizing poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Lisa Daglian, who will be followed by Christine Coleman.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lisa Daglian. I'm the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. We're very encouraged by the news out of Albany that congestion pricing seems to be becoming a reality. That's good news for the entire region. Reducing congestion will not only help speed buses, emergency vehicles, and freight deliveries within the congestion zone, it will prevent billions of pounds of greenhouse gas emissions per year. While that's especially beneficial for those with asthma, it will help us all breathe a little easier. We'll also be able to breathe a little easier knowing that approximately $15 billion, once bonded, will be available for the FY 2024 capital plan, help fund Fast Forward, Long Island Railroad Forward, and Metro North Way Ahead. Critical upgrades to track and station infrastructure, modernization of signals, improved accessibility, and new rolling stock are some of the benefits we can expect to see. While it ain't over till it's over and the budget is passed, we appear to be on the right track. We're encouraged by the progress that's being made and are proud to be part of the Fix Our Transit Coalition, fighting for the region's transit and economic future. The fight also must continue within the agencies, and we applaud procurement of 123 new bus lane enforcement cameras that you'll be voting on today, to speed the way on SBS routes in Brooklyn and Manhattan. We hope the program proves to be successful and will be expanded throughout the city. We also hope that the stringent fare evasion enforcement measures discussed in detail on Monday prove to be successful. More than $225 million is at stake. Not quite enough to buy Ken Griffin's townhouse, but certainly enough to make a real difference in the quality of riders' commutes, from Montauk to Wassaic and all points in between. It's important to keep the conversation focused on reliable and sustainable funding sources for the MTA. One way to do that is to release the 20-year needs assessment, which will pave the way for the next capital plan and will show elected officials and the public the projects and needs for years ahead, how congestion pricing money will be spent, and how much more needs to be identified to meet the needs of the entire system.
Thank you, Ms. Daglian. The next speaker is Christine Coleman, who will be followed by Michael Howard.
Good morning. I'm Christine Coleman with the People's MTA, and I'm here to speak again on this very critical issue of accessibility. I'm almost 9 months pregnant, and pretty soon I'm going to be another mom struggling on the New York City subway stairs with a baby and a stroller. I've already spent many trips carrying heavy bags up and down stairs, so I can only imagine what this is going to be like when I have a 20-pound stroller and a baby, plus my belongings. Malaysia Goodson died at 22 years old while carrying a stroller and her 1-year-old child on the stairs. And just imagine if she had had access to an elevator, how her death could have been prevented. Accessibility is a right. We need a subway system that's safe for everyone, whether you are 9 months pregnant like me, or a parent with a stroller, or a person in a wheelchair, or just somebody who's trying to get through the subway safely with heavy bags and luggage. MTA needs to install elevators in every New York City subway station, because anything less than a fully accessible system is truly unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. The next speaker is Michael Howard, who will be followed by Tony Murphy.
Good morning. My name is Michael Howard. My title is Green New Deal. Green New Deal is not a bill, it's a revolution presented by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez at District 14 right here in New York City. G&D is not just for jobs creation, is also great for our transportation and for our environment. Here's the bus depots still need digital navigation boxes, which is Michael J. Quill, Queens Village, Casey Stengel, Baisley Park, Flatbush, Grand Avenue, Kingsbridge, and a few more at JFK, Jamaica, and LaGuardia depots as well. President Byford, I'm not denouncing you on everything what you have kept your promises on, your fast forward agenda. Let me see. Which I really enjoy. It's really Governor Cuomo who keeps slowing your agenda down. DOT needs to fix sidewalk curbs in Far Rockaway, which is my neighborhood, on Beach 9th Street and Sigurd Boulevard, and plus Sigurd Avenue and Beach 8th Street, so it would be safe for people with disabilities like myself and others with also in wheelchairs and canes and crutches. You know what I mean? Thank you very much.
Mr. Howard, the next speaker is Tony Murphy, who will be followed by Victor Andrews.
Hi, I'd like to start and give over the first part of the time my comments by having the cousin of Malaysia Goodson just say a few words.
Good morning. I just want to start off by saying, like, I just want to speak from my heart. This is not easy for me or my family. Like, I feel like my cousin should still be here. She had her 1-year-old daughter in her hand walking down these stairs. I'm a mother of 2, so I know the struggle of walking up and down the stairs with a baby and bags and strollers. I understand. It's not fair. I feel like you guys are raising the price and nothing is being done. I want to know where's all of this money going to. We need elevators, if not at every station, at least at every other station, or every 2 stations. You have people with strollers, babies, pregnant, walkers, wheelchairs, anything that you could think of. Struggling up and down these stairs is not right. It's not fair. I feel like y'all have to do something fast, quick, before something like this happens again. You never know. You never know. I don't want nobody else family to feel the pain that my family feels. We talk about my cousin every day. She should still be here with us. She should still be here with us. I shouldn't be standing here talking on her behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Andrews, who will be followed by Jessica De La Rosa.
Yeah, what she said is correct. If there were elevators, that wouldn't have happened. But I'm here to talk to my friend who lives in Staten Island named Dimitri. He said that when he gets the SBS bus from Staten Island, he has to literally grab somebody sighted to help him get the bus because he has to go in the middle of the street because they don't stop at the curb. They stop in the middle of the street. So I'm asking MTA, what are we going to do about that? Because he's blind like me as well, and he doesn't feel that he should have to grab a sighted person to run in the middle of the street to get the bus. And also, on-demand service should stay where it is because we can actually go when we need to go. We can go as we need. If Accessoride, you have 4 or 5 meetings in one day, you're not going to make it because you have to book in advance. But if you have on-demand, you can go as you please. So I thank you, Andy Byford, for that.
Thank you for your remarks. The next speaker is Jessica De La Rosa, who will be followed by Kevin Zhang.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm here today to talk about Accessoride. Being an Accessoride member since I was 13 years old, I've had seen the changes, both good and bad. My mother also uses Accessoride as she has both a physical and cognitive disability. One day last summer, the same day as the West Indian Day Parade, my mother went to her friend's house to enjoy a barbecue. After enjoying the day with her friends, she was picked up at her scheduled pickup time, which is like a miracle in itself. But she arrived home 5 hours later. I spent hours on the phone with dispatch trying to see where she was stuck in traffic. I was trying to get my boyfriend out there to pick her up or something to help my mom. My mom calls me and she lets me know that she needs to use the bathroom now. And to be very honest and open, she needed to make a bowel movement. After hours with no food or water or a bathroom break, my mother indeed had her bowel movement on herself, all over herself in the van. Out of sheer embarrassment, she took off her sweater, placed it on her lap, and cried on the phone with me for most of the ride until she got home. I've gotten nothing but apologies, which sounds pretty, but not helpful at all. It doesn't fix the stress she endured as a result of her trip. It doesn't fix her fear to use Accessoride since the trip. It doesn't fix her sitting in her bodily fluids for hours and being embarrassed. Accessoride desperately needs to be improved. Traffic is unavoidable, I understand, but sympathy, empathy, and informed employees will help make that step in the right direction. Until then, keep eHail going and expand it for all Accessoride members so no other person has to go through this with a simple, we're sorry, Band-Aid fix. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. De La Rosa. The next speaker is Kevin Zhang, who will be followed by Jennifer Van Dyke.
Hello, good morning to Ferrand Rivera and Andy Byford. My name is Kevin Zhang. I would like to consider to all subway stations accessible because some subway accessible are not working during repairs, and that's great to alternative to use stairs or use another line for elevators. Unlike the Mercer-Goodson failed the stairs and not to install elevators at 7th Avenue on the B, D, and E train when renovation are complete, so it needs to install elevators at 7th Avenue station in Manhattan on the B, D, and E train. During station renovation, it needs to install elevators and public restrooms. So that's way to be better stations. So we are working on 57th Street, 7th Avenue on the N, Q, R, and W train, Greenpoint Avenue on the G train, Bedford Avenue, 1st Avenue, and 6th Avenue on the L train. But it needs to complex station accessible at 14th Street on the 1, 2, 3 F and M train, and add elevators on the street levels, mezzanine, and platform. Times Square shuttle train stations need to be renovation, eliminate gap fitters, and all elevators and bathrooms. Junior Street on the 3 and California Avenue on the L train station will be add transfer accessible connections, elevators, and bathrooms. And also, once the 2nd Avenue subway start phase 3 for the construction, it needs to transfer at 14th Street to the L train at 3rd Avenue and install elevators. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. The next speaker is Jennifer Van Dyke, who will be followed by Victor Diaz.
Good morning. My name's Jennifer Van Dyke. I'm with the Elevator Action Group at Rise and Resist, and as you can see, our message is elevators are for everyone. I need to make this personal for all of you around the table and on this side of the room. I became a disability rights activist because my father was in a wheelchair for the last year of his life. It opened my eyes to a lot of things that I had never seen before. Now, it is time for you to accept the responsibility of your actual job, which is running the largest public transportation system in the country with a diverse ridership, all of whom must be treated equally. Until you clean house and you make a board comprised of actual public transit users, you are living in a dream world. You can't understand what accessibility means, and you have been living in a state of denial that is unacceptable, as everyone out here has been saying over and over again. Now, I don't like to make generalizations, but look at this room. This half of the room uses public transportation. This half of the room does not, with the exception of President Byford. I want to say for the majority of you, do not take the subway every single day to and from your job. This side of the room relies on public transportation, and we need to have personal experience on the board of the MTA. I apologize if I am making unfair generalizations, but I do think it's fair to say that this half of the room uses public transportation in a way that this half of the room does not. And until you have people on the board who represent this half of the room, the MTA cannot move forward, cannot make progress. I urge you to fund Fast Forward, to look at the possibilities that are being presented and laid out in your own data on your website. And please fund Fast Forward and get people on the board who represent New York. Thank you.
The next speaker is Victor Diaz, who will be followed by Valerie Bruno. Victor Diaz. The next speaker is Valerie Bruno, who will be followed by Valerie Joseph.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Valerie Bruno, and I use Accessoride. And until the 1st of March, when I was told there was a voucher system, it was easy to get e-hail to get to doctor's appointments. I've had cancer. I have a lot of bone problems. I go to the doctor probably like 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes 2 in a day, like today. And I called 2 mornings ago to get a ride in e-hail the next day at 7 a.m. when the line opened up, and they said there were no more vouchers available from the day before. I tried to find out how many vouchers a day are given out, but no one will tell me that. One woman I called the day after I found out, she said, oh, this is not for the public disclosure. And that really made me see red and angry. And I have not found an answer from anyone of how many vouchers a day are given out to people that need them with disabilities that have Accessoride. And sometimes I get called 4 in the afternoon for a ride the next day to get to a doctor's appointment, and I can't get a ride, okay? Sometimes in the morning, the doctor will say, oh, we can see you today because I had one for next week and I was really sick, and I can't get it for that day because I don't have on-demand. On-demand needs to be expanded. Please, please. You call up and you get a ride, and you get to the doctor. You can get to a friend. Most of the time, mine's to the doctor. I haven't been to many friends lately. But the other thing is that I live in Astoria, Queens, and I was going down when they were doing the Broadway Astoria, the N train station, and I see the staircase going in about a year ago, and I yell up. I said, "Hey, are you putting that in for an elevator?" And they said, "No, it's just for another staircase," because they were closing off the other section. So that was, and all along that line, they are being fixed up, and they haven't put any out. I think there's one now at Ditmars and one at Hoyt Avenue, but that doesn't help people down on 36th Avenue and on Broadway and on 31st Avenue. So I'm asking you to please do that. And the other thing is to clean up the elevators that you do have in the subways. Most of the time, they smell like urine. You'd rather drag your child up the stairs than go into those elevators. They are filthy, and they don't work. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening.
The next speaker is Valerie Joseph.
Good morning, board members. My name is Valerie Joseph. I'm from the Brooklyn Center for the Independence of the Disabled. I'm an accessoride advocate and a rider. Why am I here today? To represent my community, my people, and me. I was here on Monday to testify, and I'm back today because we need this service. eHail, the Curb app, I'm loving it, and everybody here is loving it, and those who aren't here would like it. As my ED said this morning, I was featured in a news story. I enjoyed it, but I told the truth. We need this service, we demand this service, and we're actually, how do you say, not need it? Yes, actually do need it, but we want it. We need to be treated as fair as everyone here. I can't take the train. Why? Because of medical issues. I get dizzy. So what do I have? I have Accessoride. Sometimes Accessoride is not reliable. We know this. But the cab service, I've gone everywhere I need to go. Today, I was in a cab. Yes, it's because of traffic. I got here late. But obviously, it worked. And I left my house at 6:15. Why should I have to do this? It hurts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Mr. Chairman, that was the last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Marino, and I want to thank all of our members of the public who spoke to us this morning for coming and sharing your point of view with us. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March MTA board meeting. Before we start, I'd like to point out that last month I introduced two of our newest board members, David Mack, who is here, and I introduced Sarah Feinberg, who was not here. But I'd like you all to meet Sarah Feinberg, our very newest board member, and of course reacquaint yourself with David Mack, who has been around this track before. Welcome both. And I want to once again take this opportunity for those of you who looked in on our Transit and Bus Committee meeting to congratulate Andy Byford, Sandy Librera, and their whole team for the progress we're seeing under the Subway Action Plan. Day-to-day operational improvements they're making across the system, and they are impressive. We've now reduced the number of delayed trains by 10,000 or more every month for the past 6 consecutive months. February 2018, our customers endured 60,446 delayed trains. 1 year later, February 2019, that number was 37,119, a nearly 40% reduction in delays for our riders. We've seen on-time percentage rise from 60% to over 75%, and major incidents fall from a high of 105 in January 2018 to under 50 in February 2019. Customers are noticing too. Complaints are down by 15%, and that is good. We're not anywhere near where we need or want to be, but this is impressive progress. all in the right direction. And our thanks again, I know I speak for the entire board, to Andy Byford, Sally Librera, and the entire Subways team. At the Transit Committee meeting also on Monday, board member David Jones, committee member David Jones also, made a great point that I want to briefly touch on this morning. Mr. Jones stressed the critical importance of full and complete transparency when it comes to our paratransit costs. More specifically, he suggested we publicize the costs of our popular e-hail pilot program so riders, the public, and our partners in government understand exactly how much it costs to provide this service, this important and necessary service. And I couldn't agree more. So today, in the spirit of full transparency, I want to let you know that the MTA staff will soon be providing this board and the public with a full and comprehensive report on paratransit costs. Also, as Andy Byford said very strongly at a recent Transit Committee meeting, and I am reaffirming today, I'll repeat this as many times as I need to, we are not backing away at all from our commitment to make 50 additional stations ADA accessible through our next capital program. Our goal in the next 5 years is for no customer to be more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. That's what we're planning for, and that's what we're fighting for. We're making these historic investments to bring our century-old system eventually up to a state of full accessibility, but I believe this is a credible and good start. Now, the minutes of February's meeting have been distributed to all the board members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If there are none, may I have a motion to approve? Second? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are approved. Next is the Committee on Finance, which I chaired. There is one action item for board approval. The action item requests approval for the filing of the 2018 procurement report. The committee recommends this action, and I move it. Is there a second? Second. Is there any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? This action item is approved. There's one non-competitive procurement for $2.5 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it. Is there a second? Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? Motion's approved. There are 9 competitive procurements for $1.3 billion. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there a second? Is there any discussion on these procurements? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements are passed. There is one ratification for $17.9 million. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it. Is there a second? Is there any discussion on this ratification? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The ratification is approved. Finally, there are 5 real estate action items for board approval on pages 82 through 94 of the board book distributed for the meeting. These actions include a $6 million procurement for AECOM. The committee recommends these actions, and I move them. Is there a second? There's a second. Any discussion on this item, on these real estate items? If there is none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The real estate action items are approved, and that concludes the finance report. Of course, while I'm here, Transit and Bus Committee met, and I also chaired that meeting. There are 4 competitive procurements, 3 for New York City Transit, for $10 million, one for MTA Capital Construction for $11.5 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them. Is there a second? All right. Is there any discussion on these procurements? Mr. Saul.
I'd like to talk about JMT, which is on page 106 in the board book. It's item number 3. We've talked about this before, but I feel this is a very, very significant departure from the way we've handled governance at the MTA. When the original contract was given out for the L train construction, apparently there was a lot of discussion by the engineers and the in-house staff and I guess outside consultants of which way to proceed with the L train tunnel improvement and repairs. And the question was, do they take the walls out or do they hang the cables from the existing walls? And apparently there was a detailed discussion here. After all this came to the board approved, I think it was approximately a $500 million contract with Judlow. There was a tremendous amount of discussion, and we were going to close the tunnels and do a complete remodeling of the tunnel and repair. All of a sudden, without any board input at all into this thing, we have now gone in a different direction. So there was a whole discussion here. How could this be? How could the fiduciaries, which is the group sitting around this table, approve something like this? Or how could this project go ahead without it being approved? And at that time, there was a whole discussion about having an independent consultant or engineer who was completely impartial come in here and advise the board whether this change in direction for the project was the right way to go. This was what the discussion was. So before us now, unfortunately, we have a contract for approximately $1.5 million for a consultant. But this consultant is going to do nothing to advise the fiduciaries whether this is in fact the right way to go and change the scope of the project on the L train and the Canarsie Tunnel. Okay, so here we are. We're now going to have another consultant to watch all these thousands of people we've got working here in consultants, which, believe me, we do not need. This is why we are in the mess we're in. Just spending money redundantly with really no impact on the project. Completely unnecessary, in my opinion, and the opinions of a lot of other people around the place. On top of it all, and I don't know this for a fact, but the Wall Street Journal last week reported that Andy Byford had a consultant or engineer, civil engineer, that worked with him in London that was going to come in here and advise us if we were going to hire the consultant, which I think is totally wrong to start with, for $350 million. I don't know whether that, $350,000, I'm sorry. I don't know whether that is factually correct. It was in the Journal. I don't know whether there was another contractor or a consultant here that would have done the work for $350,000, but this is the way what the Wall Street Journal reported, I believe, last Wednesday. So for us to go ahead and approve a $1.5 million contract, which does nothing to help us with a fiduciary responsibility that eventually I assume this board's going to have to approve when the contract's renegotiated with Judlow. And to go ahead with this thing is on 2 counts crazy. By the way, I wonder whether this JMT is really an independent consultant. I don't know what their relationship, it says there was no relationship with Brinkerhofer, but maybe it was a spin out. I don't know. I haven't done the research on it. But I am so opposed to this. I think for fiduciaries to go ahead, it's just really a sham.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like the record to reflect my recusal on the 270 Park Avenue item.
Is there anyone else? One second. I presume these procurements have been moved and seconded. Am I correct in that? Correct. Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Albert.
When we had a discussion of an independent consultant to guide us on the L-Train project, I think many of us were under the impression that it would have happened sooner and it would have allowed the board to make an intelligent decision between the original total shutdown of 15 months, which I understand may have even been able to be done in 12 months, to the now plan that is in place, which is a partial shutdown. Unfortunately, the selection of the consultant did not happen in a timely enough fashion that we thought we were going to see, and so the revised plan, the plan the governor has put forward, has moved ahead in the interim period. So I guess my question and comment is, if we had had the consultant earlier, and I assumed that the three-person selection committee got to work on it as soon as the board was done with their discussion on this, why didn't we get the consultant earlier? Were we not able to select one that we felt was independent, or was the process delayed in some fashion?
Okay, let me address a couple of things that I've heard that are deeply in error. One is this consultant never was to come back to the board with a comparison between Plan A and Plan B. I've said that before. We've all said that before. We've gone to the videotape on all these meetings, but apparently that's not good enough for some members. Second, I think, as you know, the three board members who looked at proposals, by the way, finding a credible consultant who has never done business with the MTA before is a little like finding hen's teeth. We found one. We found a couple, but one in particular. Three-member panel selected that individual, and with as much speed as we could muster, we put them to work. But by the way, it was only a matter of a few days. You have to approve. By the way, we haven't approved their contract yet. This is about that. So you want them to work without having approved their contract? I don't think that is reasonable, or that we have asked that of any other individual or company that we've contracted through the MTA. So let's get our facts straight here. The idea is this independent consultant, and I believe they are independent. Again, we conflate a lot of things here. Brinkerhoff has nothing to do with Parsons Brinkerhoff. In fact, Brinkerhoff is a environmental firm, engineering firm, that is a minority business enterprise. Very different from the Parsons Brinkerhoff that we all know. We've said that before, too. Apparently, that doesn't matter. As soon as we approve this contract, this contractor, this engineering firm is to work, they will, as I've expressed to everyone, and I'm getting a memo out again to the board members, will report to the board, will report to all of us in public session, and more frequently than 1 month, if necessary, on what is going on with this tunnel, if we are complying with safety regulations, which was the original intent of this. Andy Byford's original intent, certainly mine and the board's, and to make sure that we are complying with all OSHA requirements to keep our workers and our riders safe. This commitment has been made repeatedly. I once again make it before.
The vote is pending on competitive procurement. JMP is in here, so first we have to go through a vote of here.
I got it. I once again make it to the board and to the public. But let me remind you all, what we are voting on now is the competitive procurements. The JMT contract is in the next section. So, again, let's just keep track of things here and do it right. We have a motion and second on the competitive procurements. Mr. Merdler.
I just want to add one fact, if I may, Mr. Chairman. The objective of what is going on here is to make sure that 200,000 plus people are not unduly inconvenienced for an extended period of time for no good reason at all.
Thank you, Mr. Merdler. I appreciate that. If we're going to continue to discuss this in the wrong section, we're not doing justice to the competitive procurements that that we must vote on now. But Ms. Vanterpool.
I appreciate the opportunity. Since we're sticking with facts, and I'm not going to reiterate the full comments I made at Monday's meetings, but since we're sticking with facts, the draft scope that was presented to the board was indeed a very different scope that was ultimately decided by the three-person steering committee or selection committee. And I think that difference reflects or captures a good deal of the sentiment expressed by some of my board colleagues. I don't want to speak for them, but it certainly reflects why I'm voting no against this section that we're going to get to next on ratifications, on JMT specifically.
Gotcha. If we're done on competitive procurements, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The competitive procurements are carried. 4 ratifications for $31.4 million for New York City Transit. I believe we have discussed most of these. But if there's any further discussion from anybody else, please indicate that. If not, I'll move them. Is there a second on the ratifications? All in favor?
1 second, are you going to take the JMT separate since there really isn't any objections?
No, sir, I am not. We're voting on them as a package. If you wish to vote against JMT, please indicate that and the record will reflect it.
So
we've done that before.
So it's all or nothing?
No, it's not all or nothing. I'm simply telling you, if you wish to vote against JMT, which I presume you wish to do, you will indicate that, as every other board member has indicated on items over the course of time I've been on this board. The record will reflect that. The record will reflect your individual vote on any one of these ratifications.
It was my opinion, frankly, that if there was an objection on one and there weren't any objections on everything else, we would have 2 separate votes.
Well,
but anyway,
no.
It's not a do what you want.
No. All those in favor? Opposed? 3 in opposition on all the ratifications.
I am just opposing JMT.
I understand that.
JMT.
Thank you. Then the ratifications pass. There are no non-competitive procurements, and that concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report. Metro North Committee was chaired by Mr. Pally, and he'll be making the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There is 1 non-competitive procurement for $1.3 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there a second? Dr. Metzger seconds. Any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining?
There are 2 competitive procurements for $42.4 million. Committee members approved one of these 2 procurements, the other procurement to Arch Associates for the Maybrook Trail design and construction was advanced to the Finance Committee and subsequently to the board pending receipt of additional information. As requested, board members were provided with such additional information yesterday. I hope that information was sufficient in that regard, and accordingly I move both of the competitive procurements.
I'll second. Is there any discussion on these? Mr. Merdler and then Ms. Vanterpool.
Mr. Chairman, I abstain on the Arch Associates matter on the basis of the discussion at the Metro North Committee meeting and the additional information provided.
Okay. Record will reflect that when we vote. Ms. Vanterpool.
I'm recusing myself from Judd Lau and TC Electric, but on the Arch Associates, I just want to briefly comment that there was a good deal of discussion at Monday's committee meeting. We don't need to rehash that now, but there was a good deal of information provided by President Rinaldi and her staff to allay some of our concerns as a committee pertaining to the amount of money that MTA, specifically Metro North, might be on the hook beyond this procurement amount. It was explained that this is not money coming out of Metro North's budget. It's actually being funded by New York State, and I think that's an important point to continue to impress, particularly to the public and during this meeting, that this is not coming out of our budget. It is being funded by New York State. We will be reimbursed. And there was discussion about how much beyond Metro North would be responsible for paying, and we have gotten assurance from the staff that should there be an additional amount above what is requested in this procurement, it would have to come back to the board for approval. And then at that point, if such a situation arises, we can either continue to support it or not. But I just want to be clear that this is being fully funded, as has been explained by staff, again, by New York State.
Okay. Is there anyone else? These procurements have been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. Mr. Merdler abstains. The procurements carry. Thank you very much, Mr. Pally.
There are no ratifications this month, and this concludes the Metro North report.
But not so fast, because you're on Long Island Railroad.
Long Island Railroad Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There are 2 competitive procurements, 1 request for proposals for Long Island Railroad, and 1 procurement for MTA Capital Construction in the amount of $1.5 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Is there a second on the procurements? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. The procurements carry.
There are 4 ratifications for MTA Capital Construction for $5.5 million. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Is there a second? Is there any discussion on the ratifications? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining. The ratifications are approved.
There are no non-competitive procurements, and this concludes the Long Island Railroad report, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you for doing double duty. Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Mr. Merdler.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met, and I report the following. There are no non-competitive procurements. There is 1 competitive procurement in the total amount of $8.24 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Is there a second? Any discussion on the procurements? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining. Procurement carries.
There are no ratifications. This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Merdler. Finally, I chaired corporate governance this month, and we have 3 action items. First action item, requests the board approve the MTA's mission statement and authorizes submission of the annexed 2018 mission statement, measurements, and performance indicators report to the Independent Authority's Budget Office. The next item requests board approval of MTA's all-agency procurement guidelines and all-agency guidelines for the procurement of services. The final action requests board approval for revisions to certain existing policies of the MTA and its agencies. Those members present for the committee meeting recommended these action items, although a committee quorum was not present at the meeting. Accordingly, I move these actions. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on these actions? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstaining. That does it for the report on the...
Are you finished? I wanted to make one statement.
Cool, please.
In view of the various statements that were made by the public in relation to elevator and escalator accessibility, as you and I recall, we had a very thorough discussion about many of those issues at Capital Program on Monday. And I would urge those members in the audience who would like to hear the full presentation, because it was very enlightening in relation to the current status of especially elevator accessibility issues, the stations in which they are being put into, and the plans going forward, as you recall, that I would urge all of you to look at the MTA website when it's on there to see the full presentation, because I think that will help in enlightening not only myself, who sat through the presentation, but the members of the public about what our plans are currently and what our plans on going to be going forward on elevator accessibility. So I would urge the public to look at the MTA website. The full video is there, right, at some point, and it's there now, okay, and everybody can see it in that regard. Thank you, Mr.
That's a good
Chairman.
and very timely suggestion, Mr. Pally. Thank you for that. If there's nothing else, may I have a motion to convene an executive session to discuss matters relating to collective bargaining pursuant to Section 105, 1E of the New York State Public Officers Law, and to discuss matters related to proposed, pending, or current litigation pursuant to Section 105, 1D? Second? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? We are now in executive session. Members could please take their seats. May I have a motion to go back into public session? Second. All in favor? Opposed, abstaining, we are back in public session. The board just approved a number of collective bargaining agreements that conform to the existing TWU bargaining patterns. That's what we went into one of the reasons we went into executive session. May I now have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Thank you.
Want to make a...
Yes, I just want to highlight for the board, there was one additional MTA capital construction procurement item that was reviewed and approved at New York City Transit Committee. It was listed in the agenda for today, but the staff summary itself was omitted from the package. So it's before you today.
Okay, may I have a motion to approve?
Move its adoption.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? This item is approved. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you very much. Good morning. Who's first? Should we go from left to right? Or my left to...
So it seems like there is a general consensus of a broad congestion pricing plan to fund the MTA, but obviously there's a lot of talk about carve-outs and things like that. I wanted to know whether or not the MTA had a stance on that, given that carve-outs would theoretically impact how much funding the MTA would get from the policy.
It's hard for me to respond to the specific carve-out proposals because, one, that's the job of the legislature and the governor. What we are concerned about at the end of the day is the revenue that we need to improve this system. We are told that through congestion pricing that will be available. That's what we're counting on. So we hope that that comes to pass because our riders can't wait a day longer. Yes. Anybody else? Sure. I'll have to get back to you on that. I'm not prepared to answer a Bombardier question right now, but we'll get back to you later about it. Yes.
I'd like your reaction to, and maybe if Andy can come react to it as well.
It'll be me. I'm the chairman.
Well,
I know he used to. But would you ask the question
I'll ask
first?
the question. Maybe he can weigh in as well as president of New York City Transit. The question is, Malaysia Goodson's cousin was here today. Emotional, talking about her belief that accessibility should be front and center. First of all, do you consider the lack of accessibility at that station to be a factor in her death, or do you side more with what the medical examiner found, that there was a pre-existing condition?
Again, that's a really inappropriate thing for me to weigh in on. I'm not a physician. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not an engineer. I am a rider. I am familiar with that station, and that station is a very deep cavern station. So I know what it looks like. That said, what happened with Ms. Goodson was unbelievably tragic. I think we all acknowledge that. And that's why we're redoubling our efforts to make our system, it's a 100-year-old system in a lot of places, a lot more accessible. I reiterated at the beginning of the meeting our commitment, first expressed by Andy Byford at our Transit Committee meeting and repeated to you, all of you, this morning at the board meeting, that we are committed in the next 5 years to do an additional 50 stations to ensure that our system is, that an elevator or an elevator is available every 2 stations so that no one's, left out at that point. We have an ongoing commitment. And that's why the congestion pricing effort is so important. I mean, that's how we get capital funds to be able to build these elevators. I mean, we're serious about it. We know what toll it takes. I'm on the system, as you are, every day. You see people trying to get up the stairs with great difficulty, glad when an escalator is available and working to take them the rest of the way. How frustrating it is for an elevator to be out. And that's why we've shut down on the number 1 line, 168th and 181st Street, because those are very troublesome elevators, and we're doing a full replacement on them. So, we're serious about that. We've reiterated our institutional seriousness about it and made an additional public commitment that within 5 years we'll get there. Yes.
Hi, I wanted to ask about the executive order. Can you explain to us why it keeps being lengthened in time? And I've asked the press office a couple of times now about the contractors working on the deep cleaning of subway stations, and I've asked for the names of those contractors, and I have not received it. So aren't you sort of overstepping the board here when you still have the executive order in place where they don't get to take a look at these contracts until the work's already been done and the companies have already been chosen?
There's a lot to unpack in your
And
question.
the last question is, how much longer is it going to go on?
There's a lot more to unpack in your question. First, why does the executive order keep getting renewed? That's up to the governor. That's his executive order. However, it has been very useful for us in addressing situations that, if you ask any one of our riders, profoundly dirty stations that are more than unclean, are an emergency. There wasn't it wasn't a long time ago. You could look down on the track bed of any station, and you could almost see things growing down there because there was so much dirt and debris. We're serious about cleaning them, but we're also serious about cleaning the stuff off the walls, off the pillars, things that people have contact with, cleaning the raised platform edges. That's important too, because if our riders don't have the right visibility of those safety measures, their safety is in jeopardy, and so is everyone else's. So, I think this is a serious enough problem that rises to that level.
2 press conferences to say that service is getting better. So how is it still an emergency? And shouldn't we know the names of the companies that are doing this work?
We'll get the names of the companies to you. You should know that.
It's an emergency even though service is better.
Look, service is better, but I think most of our riders will agree it's not better everywhere. Doesn't suit them, and it really, frankly, doesn't suit us. So we're working hard to get those numbers even better so that we don't have an emergency, or we're not dealing with emergencies and these very rush situations anymore.
Hi.
Hi.
Can I ask a question of Andy?
I'm sorry?
Can I ask a question of Andy?
Try asking me first, and then we'll invite Andy up.
Is this a new policy to not allow questions?
No, just ask me a question.
Okay.
I'm here.
This is about bus fare evasion, which, as you know, Andy's made a priority to crack down on.
Yes, and that's my committee.
So why does it make more sense to sort of work with the police on this rather than just make it easier for bus riders to, re-up their Metro cards or, sort of hasten all-door fare payment or something like that?
Okay, first of all, I'm glad you asked the question in that way, because we try to make it as easy as possible to help riders re-up their Metro cards. That can sometimes be a pain in the neck to some people, but we instituted Easy Pay, for example, that refills your Metro card. We have kiosks and vending machines, so we're doing our best. All-door boarding is a part of our new fare payment system. So it mystifies me sometimes that people say, well, bring on all-door boarding. No, we're addressing that. That is part of what we're trying to accomplish in our new fare payment system. So that way, we'll have sensors in the front of the bus, in the back of the bus, and every rider will have on their phone proof of payment. So that you want me to do that again? That makes it a lot easier to monitor. The point is not to have a police officer on every bus to criminalize anything, which may be at the basis of your question. The point is to try to enforce the law. Now, look, fare evasion's a problem. We've made that clear any number of times. We lose hundreds of millions of dollars, and you would rightly call us negligent if we did not try to recover that and try to bring those numbers way down, because that costs our riders money. That costs us the ability to enhance the system and to provide the services that our riders correctly demand of us. So the object here is twofold. One, to get people to comply and understand that paying a fare is not like when you go to the museum, a suggested contribution. It's a fare. I pay my fare, you pay your fare. It's fair that everyone does that.
Also, why is it that MTA police can't perform this function?
MTA police, that's a good question. MTA police are, with a couple of exceptions, limited to commuter rails, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, are commuter rail terminals. Only Grand Central is a terminal. Penn is a station. That kind of thing. That's what they do. NYPD is in charge of subways and buses. Now, the buses are, they're tough to deal with, but NYPD is working with us very hard. They've been enormously cooperative in trying to find new ways to address fare evasion and to try to find new ways to make our rides on buses and subways safer and a whole lot better. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I had some questions about financing for the LIR. Firstly, on the topic of fare evasion, there was a plan put forth on how to address it on the Long Island Railroad. I know that the issues with fare evasion are different with the commuter railroads. The plans dealt with some technology, but what you hear a lot from riders is the issue is that conductors often don't or can't collect tickets because the trains are so crowded. So can I ask you about how big a problem losing fares is on the Long Island Railroad, and whether some of the measures that were put forth, how much of a difference do you think they'll make?
Well, it's significant enough that we're all talking about it. And I know that the both railroads have stressed to conductors that it's important to lift tickets. Now, by the way, I ride Metro North. Like this morning, pretty crowded. You're standing like this. Very seldom have I ever been able to find a seat during the morning or evening rush. But the thing is that with the fare payment system as we are envisioning it, and I use the My MTA app on here too, you have proof of payment right on your phone. So it's pretty easy for a conductor to scan your barcode. Pretty easy to produce this proof of payment to anybody who comes by. We got to instruct our conductors to do a much better job of lifting tickets. We call that lifting tickets, but checking fares.
And secondly, as far as congestion pricing, there are some lawmakers that are pushing hard to have a significant portion of the revenue generated committed to the railroads. Can you weigh in on whether that's something you and the MTA would support?
Look. Again, I've tried to keep the MTA as a board out of this very interesting legislative exercise. Having been a legislator myself, you hope they do the right thing. You express your point of view to them. And congestion pricing, as I see it, is beginning to take shape. I mean, the Speaker of the Assembly made an enormous assertion of leadership at the governor's suggestion, has begun to embrace and gotten his conference to embrace congestion pricing. I see that beginning to gain support and traction in the state Senate. That's good news for all of us. Will it get us all the way there? No. We'll continue to need enormous, dedicated and reliable sources of revenue to do the things that we need to do to make this a better system. It's an old system. It has been underfinanced for an enormously long time. We can't do it this way anymore. And I think everybody's beginning to understand that. If we're to provide our customers, whether it's on commuter rail, buses and subways, bridges and tunnels, with the kind of service that they should expect from the MTA, we've got to make enormous investments in the system, and we're trying to do that. Congestion pricing will help. The carve-outs are what they'll be in a legislative process. Having been one for a while in my life, I know how interesting that experience is, but I'm not going to second-guess legislators or the governor.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman. We've heard a lot about congestion pricing and more dedicated revenue streams. Given that that is still 2 years away, we don't know the exact figure. A panel may have to discuss it. What kind of challenge does that present to continuing the improvement that we've seen? And how can you continue the pace that we're at now without any new money now?
Well, that's the right question. We do have some new money now. Phase 1 of congestion pricing is already here. That extra $50 million helps us address some important needs in transit deserts throughout our region. And that's stuff we're taking seriously. Other revenue as well that come from, for example, the recent fare and toll increase. We'll go to that as well. And then the big part of this in congestion pricing and other streams of revenue will allow us to plan, will allow us to begin to re-envision our system and re-engineer our system so that we can provide much more reliable service. The service that, frankly, our riders and customers have long deserved. Yes, absolutely. We've already begun procurement reforms, cost containment reforms. You've been fully briefed, I know, on the steps we've already taken to not only control costs, but to reduce operating costs, moving away from the capital budget. Hiring freeze, vacancy control, department by department review of what we're doing, consolidating services and functions throughout the agency, a reduction in consultant contracts and vendor contracts of 10%. That's painful, not popular, but necessary if we're to keep us providing the kinds of service that we need to. Mm-hmm.
Were you done, Greg?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Pardon me. One, this was mentioned during the meeting. And if you could just, sorry, I'm new here. Forgive me with this microphone.
Me too.
What is, can you reiterate this response to the criticism that you received for the consultant that's been hired for the L train, saying that it's not necessary and it's a drain on taxpayer resources?
I couldn't disagree more. One, if we did not have an independent consultant looking over everybody else's shoulders and reporting back to the board on important issues that we have discussed from day one, transition to and readiness to transition to revenue service, safety, debris disposal, and all the other things that we've already outlined, then the board would correctly say, and the public would correctly say, we're being negligent. So we're doing that. That happens out in the open. That's a commitment we've made, and anybody thinks we don't need it, I think that's a big mistake. But fortunately, the board agreed with me, so we're proceeding on that track, and I think it's a positive track on which to proceed.
Okay, and next question. There's these air quality testers at the L train stations to monitor dust and silica levels during construction. There's supposed to be live updates, but that's not happening. When are we going to get access to that, or when will that begin?
I'll speak with Jano. Jano here? Jano Lieber. I'll ask him to make that available. I mean, we talked about that as well at one of our committees, and we're vitally concerned with it. We want to see what those levels are. I mean, we've gotten, in spite of the reports of dust, because there's a 100-year tunnel, housekeeping isn't in there every day. So you can imagine the levels of dust that are in there. But there's all kinds of dust. There's the unpleasant, nasty dust that'll get on your clothes and irritate your eyes. And there's silica dust. Mm-hmm. We're taking silica dust very seriously, and that's the result of demolition of concrete. Mm-hmm. We're not doing a lot of that, but we're monitoring it. And in fact, the last monitoring we took produced a level that was 1/5. Let me repeat that, 1/5 the level of the maximum allowable for being exposed 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, which doesn't occur. Mm-hmm. So we're taking it seriously.
But why haven't the live updates started? That was supposed to be part of the program.
Yeah, we're going to start them soon.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
May you give us a summary in Spanish pretty much regarding your whole take on...
Everything?
No, not everything. Congestion prices, tarifas de congestión. Básicamente su reacción a lo que está sucediendo en Albany con el proceso legislativo y qué representaría esto para la MTA y las personas que usan el subterráneo.
Bueno, la MTA necesita desesperadamente esa fuente de fondos para poder mejorar el sistema de transporte que tenemos no solamente en esta ciudad, sino también en esta región. A mejorar las condiciones en cada estación de tren, los señales, los ferrocarriles y también el servicio que le brindamos al público. Por eso necesitamos esa acción de parte de la legislatura estatal y del gobernador y agradecemos su acción y su cooperación en este asunto.
Usted dijo que pueden planificar una vez se decidan cuántos serán los fondos y esto supuestamente ocurriría en 2 años. ¿Nos puede decir exactamente qué tipo de planificación les permite eso una vez se aprueben los fondos?
Bueno, si estamos diseñando un sistema efectiva, hay que planificar la compra de ascensores, la compra y el diseño de estaciones, de los carros, de cada pieza de equipo que tenemos y que vamos a necesitar para poder brindar el servicio que necesitamos en este sistema.
Mr. Chairman, can you tell me when did the MTA...
Es señor presidente.
Señor Presidente. Señor, when did the MTA change its plan from hiring a third party to review the new plan to just having the third party review the safety of the new plan? And I heard what you said today, but on January 15th, you also said, I've stated a number of times that the third party will be engaged to report the board and report to all of us what the best path forward is. That's very different than just monitoring the safety of the work in the...
No, that's the fragment you would like to focus on. The entire context of that was looking at the safety plan and the operations plan, and if there are some issues with that, to recommend the best path forward. It was never, ever a comparison between Plan A and Plan B, just to correct your representation.
And just a quick follow-up on Malaysia Goodson. Did you, sir, or Mr. Byford reach out to the family personally to offer your condolences? And if not, who or did anyone from the MTA do this?
No, I did not, and to my knowledge, Mr. Byford did not, but he could, and I don't think he did. And I regret that. I think it's generally customary that police officials do that, but look, let me cut to the chase. Sorry that it didn't happen. That's regrettable, and certainly want to express our condolences to the Goodson family, as we did, by the way, at the time of in public, at the time of the incident, because what happened here was enormously tragic, and we feel for their loss. We feel for their family.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
On the consultant, on the L train, you say they've been working since March 1st, right? And they are there to review the coordination between doing repair work and getting service back in order, right?
And safety issues.
And sure, and safety issues. Okay. There has been closures and work done, right, preliminary, that in March up to roughly March 18th, right? You had to close for overnight service, close for weekends. There was a week where you had higher dust levels than usual, and then 2, you had a train run over some wires, as your press office called, materials, but they ran over some wires left over from work in that area.
Debris.
Debris. And did those consultants review that? Because that really impacted the morning rush hour. So did they ever look at that, and did they ever report to the board what happened?
I'm not aware, but they're ready for a report the next time we get together. And as issues that are urgent and emergent occur, we'll have even more frequent reports by memo and email to the board members.
And so to follow up then, What's your level of confidence? What can you tell riders who, when there is work existing on the L and you had a shutdown, so it's not like you had one tube open like you planned, but you had a shutdown and the morning rush hour was still, you had to cancel service between Brooklyn and Manhattan. What confidence can you give riders that when full service is back for the morning rush, it's going to be back?
Here's what I can tell you. The work that you are talking about and addressing yourself to right now is work that would have gone on and was going on independent of the change in plan on the L train. Let's understand that.
What's the merit of that, though?
Hold on. You let me answer, and independent of that. That's important to note. Now, if there are issues, we certainly want to look at that, and we want to hold the contractor accountable. And in fact, that's why we're in close communication on an almost daily basis with the executive at the MTA, who is coordinating with Andy Byford the construction of the L train tunnel, as well as the independent engineer who has just gotten there, essentially, just beginning to set up, beginning to review things. We will have a full report for you, for the board, and for everybody else. Certainly the riders of the L train. Now, let's bear in mind, and it's pointless to try to split hairs about things. Our point is, if there is a way to ease the ride and eliminate the inconvenience, the monstrous inconvenience, to 275,000 riders on the L train, yeah, that's a no-brainer, and I want to find that way.
Okay,
that's what this is about.
To follow up, you say splitting hairs. Why did you make the distinction of this was work that was planned and it's distinct from work that's going to happen in April? Why is that important, like you said?
Yeah, because it would have happened anyway.
I understand that, but why is the nature of the work different?
Because sometimes people conflate the issues. You may have noticed that at some of our meetings. People do. This is work that was approved previously under the old plan. It's going on right now. There's work that will go on, which is essentially re-racking the cables, using the FRP to wrap bench wall, and those are things that I expect will not create the kinds of issues that people are anticipating. Someone.
Regarding the methodology you guys are using to calculate fare evasion, some critics have said that it is not consistent or comprehensive enough. So part one, what can you defend the methodology that went into calculating the fare evasion? And then two, when it comes to enforcing that on buses, what would you say to people who are concerned that between putting cops on buses, bus riders are more low income than other riders, and also converting to a payment system that relies heavily on phones? A lot of low income people don't have phones. What would you say to people who are concerned that the MTA is pushing or discouraging riders from taking the bus, especially low income people?
I would say that's completely untrue. Let me tell you, but I'm glad you asked those questions because they're important to clarify. One, nobody's criminalizing anybody. Two, nobody's targeting the low income or people of color. I use the bus too. And by the way, I will swipe my card and, you insert your card in a thing that swallows it for a second. But then somebody else, a lot of somebody else's, will walk in through the back door. I presume you've never seen that before. I have, all throughout this city. I've also seen it on subways. So, look, and I've also seen people from all walks of life pull out their phone in buses and either have conversations or check their email or play a video game. So, phones are not as scarce as one might suggest.
And then, but regarding the methodology, could you defend that?
The methodology, as I understand it, is it's a sample of ridership from place to place, and then it's extrapolated into a percentage. I don't, I can't give you the equation, but it's a sample. By the way, just like most things are estimated, people take samples. They're reasonably assured of their validity, and then they present percentages that make sense, and by the way, that are validated not only by people who click and check, but people who watch.
So you have absolute faith in those numbers?
I have faith.
Okay.
Thank you.
We're going to have Andy.
By popular demand, Andy Byford.
Thank you. You're a hard act to follow, Mr. Chairman. Okay, where do we want to start? Andrew.
Your thoughts on what Malaysia Goodson's cousin said, regardless of what the medical examiner said, do you consider her death to be a wake-up call with regard to accessibility?
Well, I think, let me say straight up, it was absolutely tragic. I was horrified when I heard about it. But what I would say is it reinforced my desire, my absolute determination to push on with that element of our capital plan. We've made it very clear within the Fast Forward plan that we intend to make this system as accessible as it can be in the shortest possible time frame. So right now we have 51 elevators under construction. In the first 5 years of the Fast Forward element of our capital plan, we will make another 50 stations accessible to the point that you'll be no more with scientifically chosen infill, informed by what Transit Centre came up with, but we also did a workshop in this very room. We will infill 50 stations. You'll be no more than 2 stops away from an accessible station. In the following 5 years, another 130 stations. So we will then be within striking distance of the fully accessible system that ultimately we all want. We're all on the same page as these guys, right? So when I heard about that, what it did was steel my resolve to push on and make that a reality. So that in a way is Malaysia Goodson's legacy, I would say. So that plus the things we're doing right now, it's not all jam tomorrow, to use a British expression. It's fixing things now, really motoring, really pushing my maintenance teams to keep elevators in service. Doing work with Alex Elagudin, our full-time senior advisor on accessibility, to put out an accessibility dashboard, which we've just launched. Pushing on with the group station managers, we heard it earlier on that some of the elevators have been in a disgusting state. So we're doing something about that. The new group station managers have janitors assigned to them by group now, and one of their mandates is go and press the button, see if the elevator's working, and also make sure that that elevator is clean. Give it a clean as regularly as it needs it. So we're taking action now. We have 51 stations under construction now. There'll be another 50 stations in the next 5 years. To make that achievable goal of no more than 2 stations away. So we're deadly serious about it, and that, I would say, is the legacy.
Andy, if you could just react to the Bombardier question I asked before. You had said in January they weren't making a case to win future rail car contracts. Now the cars are being delivered again. How is that contract going? Are they making more of a case now? Okay.
So, I've got to be a little judicious with my words because at the end of the day, this is contractual. But the good news is, you already know this, we have turned the production line on again, where we had stopped Bombardier from delivery. They are now re-delivering, so that's good. And we have something like 168 units in service. So we've just passed the halfway mark of the contract. So I'm pleased about that. All I'll say is certainly the more they now deliver and the more the units work straight out of the box, in other words, the time between arriving on property and the testing process and getting them out on the road, and the fewer the defects when they turn up, the stronger case they make in the future. That's all I'll say on that.
And if I can just follow up with one more topic. I know that CRRC was qualified last year to bid on New York City Transit contracts. There's been some discussion about whether there could be potential use of the vehicles to conduct electronic spying. That said, a bunch of other agencies, including SEPTA, have taken contracts with them. What are your thoughts? Can you walk us through? Is this something that you've looked at? Is that even possible to do from a technical perspective?
All I'm going to say, because again, I can't play out a contractual issue in public, all I'll say is I'm always interested in new products. I'm definitely definitely interested in a wide playing field of suppliers. I don't want to be bound to one or even two suppliers. It's good to have a competitive field. Ultimately, may the best product for the best price and the best time frame win. Emma.
I have to ask, since it came up at the board meeting, did you have a recommendation for a consultant on the L train that would have cost $300,000?
I was aware of, yes, I did, but that was never a recommendation to the board. When I was looking into this, there was a proposal on the table from a contractor with whom I'm familiar that had nothing to do with the project for about that kind of figure. But then the issue moved on. I think it's good that now the board has a contractor on board, a consultant on board that will give the independent safety and operational advice which I was originally seeking. Dana.
With all the congestion pricing discussion seems to have moved on to the issue of carve-outs. Are you at all concerned that carve-outs will sort of undermine the very point of congestion pricing?
No, at the end of the day, I've got quite enough on my plate running the transit system, so I'm leaving the mechanics of the decision making up in Albany to the legislators. That's what they will do. I've been crystal clear from day one that what we need is sustainable, sustained, affordable, predictable funding. We need it in large measure. So I get the point that the more it gets whittled down, the less there is of it. Congestion pricing, if passed, will be a huge leap forward for this organization in terms of addressing the overall capital plan and all the constituent parts of it. But in itself, it's great, but we also need other sustainable revenue streams. So I'm glad to hear that there are other options being looked at. We need billions to turn this system around and to modernize it, and I think it's within our grasp now of achieving that.
Yeah, Andy, I'm hoping you could address Clayton's question about the fare evasion methodology.
Sure.
It seems like there's got to be a better way to measure fare evasion, either through sensors at the doors of buses or the weight of buses, because it seems to me like you all don't have a way to measure ridership separate from fare box revenue, and I'm wondering if you're working on that.
Yes, we are. It's the simple answer. So the methodology that we currently use is not dissimilar to that with which I'm familiar elsewhere, in that you do a sample and then you extrapolate, as the chairman said, you extrapolate that up to work out what the percentage of fare evasion is. In my experience, it's normally underplayed rather than overplayed. In other words, it's conservative, small c, rather than excessive. So what you do is you sample using, we use what are called traffic checkers. They go out and they observe what goes on, and you observe what is the prevailing level of fare evasion on different routes across the whole system, and then you can make an extrapolation, you can figure out what it is. But clearly, that is not, I suppose the only point to make was that you can't have traffic checkers on every bus every hour of the day. So that what you said about counters is exactly what we're doing. It's called APCs, automatic passenger counters. So they are effectively located above the door. So it's like a threshold system that counts people on and counts people off. So not only does that give you really good granular data about what the prevailing ridership is, you actually also know origin and destination data. But you get a very accurate picture of what the ridership is. So in the future, we will be able to contrast the APC data with the number of taps on the readers, which will be fitted. So we'll be able to tell what's the difference between the number of people who got onto the bus on and off, and what was the average number of taps, i.e. the revenue, and you'll be able to have a very accurate figure. And so that's all coming together. Any new buses now come fitted with APCs, and we're about to fit the readers, the Omni readers onto the buses on Staten Island on the express routes, and also from Grand Central down to Atlantic Barclay Centre as a 16-station trial. So we will soon have even better granular data.
Just to follow up on that. Could you, is it possible, I know there's a lot of talk about fare evaders, they were called deadbeats and freeloaders this week. Is it quite possible it's just very difficult to pay on the bus, especially for students who are in a rush or elderly people who can't get to the front? They don't have exact change. There's no way to re-up their cards. Are these is focusing on evaders really going to solve the issue?
Well, I think the impression given is that we're only focusing on evaders. That's simply not the case. We, as you know, one full quarter of Fast Forward is devoted to improving the bus service in this city. So we have done what's effectively a bus plan, and that was very well welcomed by the Bus Turnaround Coalition, by Transit Centre, by all sorts of advocacy groups. Very much welcomed the fact that we are not messing around. We have a dynamic plan, a very comprehensive plan, more bus lanes, traffic signal priority, better policing of bus lanes, towing. That's my focus, a positive focus. But I don't see these two things as binary. It's not either fare evasion or improve the bus network. Absolutely. The majority of our time is focused on improving the bus network. Take a look outside. That used to be every night an absolute embarrassing bus jam into the Hugh L. Carey tunnel. Not anymore, because we've worked with the state police and DOT to unblock it. And the bus times are improved as a result of that. But it's not binary. I just don't think it's right to let over $250 million of revenue, which could go into putting in elevators, improving service, myriad other things, improve cleanliness. We can't just ignore that. But no, as I said earlier, I think actually if anything, we probably underplay the amount of fare evasion with the techniques that we've got. You only have to ride the system, as I do every day, to see people pouring on. And I'm sorry, I don't actually buy the fact that it's because the bus is necessarily rammed. People just get on the back door sometimes when actually the bus isn't that full. Just to comment on the policing of that, I would love it if no one was found guilty of fare evasion. If what we do, by what we're talking about on stations and potentially on buses as well, by positioning staff, maybe police officers as a deterrent, means that people then don't chance it and don't evade the fare, fantastic. Job done, right? Because then no one gets criminalized. We don't want that. All we want, because it's fair to the majority, we want people to pay their fare. We heard that loud and clear at the fare hearings. People said, I'm fed up with this. I pay my fare. Why shouldn't other people? That's all we're talking about, right? I'd love it if no one actually got caught. I would rather just the deterrent and the cameras and everything else that we're talking about actually meant that everyone pays their way, which is the fair thing to do. Clayton.
Hey, Andy. So Albany is on the cusp of passing congestion pricing, which I'm sure must be a major relief to you. I saw you staring longingly at your Fast Forward book earlier, which you're wont to do. So one, how are you feeling emotionally considering that it's going to pass? And two, how has navigating the political minefield of New York City and state over the past year and change compared to your experiences in other cities?
Sure. I wouldn't say I'm a particularly emotional person. But I am excited. I'm very, very excited about the fact that I think we're on the cusp of something fantastic here. I think that in addition to all the work we've done to improve the service as is, in terms of getting the buses through traffic, the various things we've done, the progress we're making on accessibility, the improvements we've made on the subway in terms of driving up performance and punctuality and cutting out delays, more to do on that. The real prize here is to not just have the as-is system working well. It's to transform the network. It's to give New York a system that's on a par with Hong Kong, Singapore, London, the world-class systems, right? And for that, you need sustainable, substantial funding. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's about as emotional as I get. I'm very excited about it. I think we have the right plan. We've got the right team. The only thing's missing now, we've got to have the funding. We need the patience of New Yorkers while we do it. And we've got to have enduring political backing. The political scene, it's not particularly dissimilar to what I faced elsewhere. I've been around a bit. This is my 30th year in transit. In October, I'll hit the 30-year mark. So, I'm used to the hard knocks of London, of Sydney, of Toronto, and now here. I'm loving every minute of it. Thanks, everybody. There you go. A bit of emotion for you at the end.